Hi, this is Vicki with Crafting for Fun. Today I'm going to show you how to make a faux shaker card. I call this a faux shaker card because the apples that are inside of my little jar don't actually shake around, although they look like they could. The brown layer is actually lifted up with foam pop dots. There is a clear acetate level and the apples are layered behind that, but they are actually secured in place. And you might wonder why I did that. Well, the very first attempt I did at this card, had at making this card, I actually did make the apples so that they would shake around. But what I found is that they wanted to kind of stack up behind one another, and that didn't look cute at all. So I thought, well, I could just make it look like they could move, but they don't actually move. And so that's why I settled on making a faux shaker card rather than a real shaker card. Let me gather my supplies and I'll show you how to make this cute and easy card. To create today's card, you'll need the following items. You'll need a piece of cardstock for your card base. This piece measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I have scored it in the center at 5 1/2. So when I fold it, I get a standard base card, which measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You'll also need a piece of cardstock for your first layer. This piece measures 4 by 5 1/4, and the name of this color is Pear Pizzazz, and it's a light green color. You'll need another piece of cardstock for layering that measures 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. This color is soft suede, and it's kind of a medium brown color. And then I'm using a piece of pattern paper here. This piece measures 1 1/2 inches by 3 1/2 inches, and it has the same colors, the soft suede color and the red color in it, along with the vanilla color in the background. So I felt like this was a good choice for an accent paper. So I'm using just a small piece of that. I'm going to be using a small piece of jute twine. This is a vanilla color, which kind of matches my base cardstock. You'll need a piece of acetate, and acetate is just clear plastic. You sometimes hear it called clear cardstock. You can actually buy it in craft stores, or you can cull it from packaging, like the packaging that comes, like, for example, in something like a Barbie doll or a toy, or lots of items come blister packed in acetate, and if you can just cut out a piece of that, that works just fine. And this piece is, maybe 2 1/2 by 3 inches. Now, to make my card today, I'm using the stamp set that has since been retired. It's called Perfectly Preserved. It's by Stampin' Up, and it features a little mason jar and a lid and some fruit. But there are other stamp sets that would work great for this type of technique. I'm sure you can find something in your stash that can work. And if you don't have this nice mason jar shape, I've even seen punches that are in the shape of mason jars that would work very well, and you could probably just hand cut something that looks like this little topper. Now, this stamp set has a set of matching framelit dies, which make this project super easy because I'm going to be using those to cut out my pieces. In addition to that, I have red ink, which I'm using the color Real Red, and I have a brown ink, which is soft suede ink, which is the same color as my brown paper, and I'm going to be using my Big Shot. I'm also using a sentiment stamp. You could pick any sentiment stamp that you have in your stash, and I'm using 2 punches. Now, this 3/4 inch circle punch is strictly optional, but I'm going to show you why I use that later in the video. And then this oval punch that I'm using, it is 1 1/4 by 2 inches is the size that's listed on the top of this, and I'm just using this because it's a convenient size that works well with my sentiment. You could use whatever shape works with your sentiment, or you could simply cut a square. So let me set up here and I will show you how we're going to make a faux shaker card with these items. To begin with, I pulled out 3 stamps. I pulled out the little jar topper, the apple, and then the apple leaves, and I'm going to stamp those items first, get all my stamping and cutting done, and I set my sentiment stamp aside. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the little jar topper on to my block, my clear block there, and I'm going to stamp it in red ink. And this is just on a scrap of vanilla colored cardstock. So there's my jar topper. Now I'm all done with that stamp, and I'm ready to stamp my apple, and I'm going to need 2 of those. So in the same red, I'm going to ink up my apple, and I'm going to do it twice. And now I'm finished with my apple, and I'm going to do my leaves. So I'm finished with my red ink. and I'm going to need 2 sets of apple leaves, and I'm doing them in brown. I tried doing them in green and they were really cute in green, but I didn't feel like they popped as much as I wanted, so I actually decided that I preferred the brown. And I'm finished with that, so I'm going to close my brown ink and I'm going to grab my Big Shot machine. Oops, there we go. Now, I have my top plate and my bottom plate here, and I just happen to have them labeled, and this is a magnetic platform. So I'm going to lay my bottom plate down on top of my magnetic platform, and I'm going to bring my paper, and I'll probably have to run this through a couple of times because I only have 1 apple die and I'm cutting twice, and I'm going to center up my apple die there over my apple. And again, this could easily be cut out by hand, but the dies just make this job so quick and easy. And I have my jar topper here. I'm just trying to center that up, and then I'm going to cut out 1 set of leaves. And you can see by doing all of my stamping at one time, I'm able to cut multiple things out at the same time. So I'm going to put my top plate on. Try not to disturb anything, and run that through and take it back out. So now I'm able to pop out my apple, my 1 set of leaves, and my jar top. I don't need another jar top, but I do need another set of apple and leaves. So I'm going to, again, center my die over my apple, and that over my leaves. Whoops, let me make sure I get everything good and straight. There we go. Put the lid on real carefully and roll that through. So I'm completely finished with cutting my smaller pieces, but now I want to use my jar shape to cut out the jar for this card. So I'm going to actually work right here on top of my Big Shot platform. I'm going to grab the soft suede piece of cardstock that I told you to have, and the piece of designer paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put adhesive on the bottom on the piece of designer paper. I'll work here where you can see, and I'm just going to secure that to the bottom of my soft suede cardstock. So they're together, they're one piece. Now normally with the framelits you only cut through 1 layer, but in this case I'm going to be cutting through 2. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to lay my die, my jar die, and I'm going to either do it on the right side or the left side, it doesn't matter. I just find that it looks better on the side rather than in the center. I'm going to lay it on there, and I'm going to have it go down about, maybe halfway, so about 3/4 of an inch down into that paper. So get that straight, and now I'm ready to put my lid on and roll that through. Now I do go ahead and roll it back so that it goes through essentially twice to get a good cut, since I am cutting through multiple layers. And then I'm ready to just pop that little jar shape out, and that's trash, and what I want to keep is this piece here with the jar shape cut out. So I'm going to move all of these tools out of the way, and I'll be right back to show you how to finish assembling the card. Okay, now I'm going to take my base card piece and I am going to fold it in half, and I'm going to grab a bone folder and burnish that to get a nice tight crease. Next I'm going to take my layer of green cardstock and I'm going to adhere that over my base, and I want it to be centered from side to side and top to bottom. So just take a moment and center that up as best you can. There we go. Now I'm going to take this piece here, and if you have any little extra that needs to be trimmed off, you can grab a pair of scissors. I have my paper snips here, and you can trim that off. And it's really easy to see. You just follow along the edge of the paper. So now I'm ready to apply my acetate piece. So I'm just running a little bit of tape at the top and the bottom, And this acetate just happens to have a little tissue paper liner, which makes it easier to see and protects it from fingerprints. So I'm just centering that acetate over my little area there. Hope you can see that. And when you turn it over, the jar is clear. And now I am ready to take some dimensionals. Now I do like to use thicker dimensionals for this. These are some that I purchased at my local Joann's store. They're thicker than my Stampin' Up! Dimensionals. They're just foam dots that are slightly thicker, and I like these because they lift the paper up slightly higher so that it gives you more of the appearance of depth in your jar. And I'm cutting one of these in half because I have a very skinny little edge over here that doesn't give me quite enough room for a whole one. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel just the bottom two off, not any of the others, just the bottom two. Whoops. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to center this on my card. And it does have a wider border all the way around. Okay, so now I'm ready to set this aside because what I want to do is I want to assemble my apples. Now I'm going to show you what I do to assemble these apples. You have little tiny leaf pieces and the apple. Now to glue those together, you have such a small overlapping area. I'm sorry, I don't think you can see that. There's such a small overlapping area when you go to connect these leaves to these apples that it's really difficult to do. So what I do is I take a micro glue dot, just a little glue dot, and I put it right on the back of my apple at the very tip top. I'm going to show you where that is. I hope that shows up on camera. And then I take my leaves and I stick them on there and turn it over and make sure that it looks good. But that doesn't have much stability, so that's where that little 3/4 inch punch. You could certainly, the first ones I made, I didn't use a punch. I actually just cut a little square by hand and did this, but I found that this little round piece works perfect. And what I do is I just put some adhesive on it, and this is just a stabilizer, and I stick it on the back so that it covers up that where the two pieces overlap and give it a good press. And now that piece is a lot more stable. So that's how I assembled my apples. And I'm going to set these pieces aside because I have another one here that I did. So what I need to do is I need to bring back my base card and I need to do a dry fit. I want my apples to sit in the jar kind of like that. I want at least one to rest on the bottom, but I want there to be some overlap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put adhesive on the back of the second one. And they're just on the front of the card for right now because I'm just kind of fiddling with and placing them. So I have them like that. But I want them to be on the inside of the jar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these whole set of apples over, and now the two are connected. And I'm going to lift up this piece and actually stick them inside my jar. And get them exactly where I want them. And that's just exactly where I wanted them. And the reason I call this a faux shaker card is because those apples are actually secured in place. They don't shake around, but they look very much like they would because there is the illusion of space inside of that jar because this piece is lifted up. So now I'm going to tip this back and just take off those other liners so I can go ahead and secure my card front down. There we go. Now all my pop dots are glued down. Now I have this little jar topper, and I'm going to take one of those pop dots and I'm going to stick that on there. Again, I like these fatter ones for this project because it kind of lifts this little jar topper up. And I put my little jar lid on there. And then there is I'm using vanilla colored paper, and there's a little vanilla colored stripe on there. And so by using vanilla colored jute, I'm actually able to make it look like I have a ribbon tied all the way around that jar topper, when in fact all I'm doing is putting a little bow on. So I just used my jute, my twine, to tie a little bow, and I'm going to take another one of those glue dots. Oops. And stick it on the very back of that bow. Now these are micro glue dots, which are Some of my favorite. They're just tiny, tiny. And I'm just going to stick that right there on my jar topper. And then trim my tails. Now it looks like I tied a ribbon all the way around that jar, but I didn't do any such thing. So the only thing left to do is to add a sentiment. So I'm going to move everything else aside and bring back a scrap of cardstock. Let me see, I have a little bit bigger scrap here. And I'm going to use a sentiment that says thinking of you. This is a perfect get well card, but right now I need a thinking of you. I'm going to ink my stamp and stamp my sentiment. And now I am ready to just punch it out. So again, you could use whatever shape of punch works well with whatever sentiment you decide. And I'm just trimming that because my punch won't reach far enough into that paper. I stamped too far over away from the edge. And I'm going to try to get it as straight as I can. Punch that out. And now I have a sponge dauber here that just has a little leftover soft suede ink on it. I'm just barely touching those edges. Just want to give it a little color so it stands out a little bit more. And now I'm ready to go ahead and stick that on my card. Oops, there's one of those pesky liners. And again, you can put this wherever you like it on your card. There we go. Quick and easy. So I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you have any questions, please email me at craftingforfun@gmail.com or check out my blog, craftingforfun.blogspot.com, for other craft ideas. Hope to see you back here soon.